presentation slide. Thank you. And her sleep trackers. So I need help getting the presentations off Zoom and ready to go onto YouTube and the website so that everybody else can have them too. So now, with further ado, I'm going to go back to this slide and just welcome Cynthia Hammer. She has been a pioneer in the not just the Seattle ADHD space. I mean, there's a group of people that started working on ADHD, I don't know, 25 years ago, Cynthia. And I feel like they are like almost like a high school class, right? They started out in Seattle ADHD when people didn't even like, nobody recognized that adult ADHD was real. So the fact that Cynthia, along with this group of pioneers, she started ADHD resources here. It was this great event system that everybody could come to feel safe and kind of, you know, back in the days before virtual, it was a just this wellspring of support and safety for people. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Cynthia, and I'm going to stop sharing. You'll be able to share your screen.
Okay. I just wanted to say hello to everyone. I got diagnosed in 1992 when I was 49 years old. So right now I'm 80 years old. And when I got diagnosed, it was like a lot of women get diagnosed. My son was diagnosed, and I had been going to his appointments with him, and eventually learning about ADHD, I said to the doctor, I think I have ADHD, and he said, you do. So with that, I was like your story, Eliva, where I never conceived that I was having problems in life, you know, and so it was really difficult for me to get the diagnosis and to, I felt a lot of shame about it. But then I started a nonprofit because I wanted other adults to learn about ADHD. I knew actually there was the first conference for adults with ADHD. And when I went to that, I met Terry Matlin and Dr. Hallowell. And I realized that I wasn't the first adult in the United States that knew they had ADHD, but that there were a lot of us out there that didn't know at all. But right now, when it seems in the ADHD community, people have dissension because some people think it's a disability, some people think it's a difference, and some people think it's something desirable. And so I put together this presentation to try to explain why it could be all those things. And it really depends on the person and their condition and what they've experienced in life. My training is as a social worker, so I think of all those things, you know, the economics, the social, the psychological, all of that. So let's see how I screen share. Okay. Here we go. So the game of life, and I just say this is because we're born with certain things, we grow up with certain things, and then through life we experience certain things, and those all have an impact on us. And how do I get to the next slide? I guess I click. So this is just a picture of me with the book I wrote. And this shows that ADHD is highly inherited. It's thought that if a child has ADHD, there's a 50% likelihood that one or both parents also have ADHD. And what we know about ADHD, it's not a behavior disorder, it's not a mental disorder, it's not a learning disability. It's a developmental impairment of the brain's self-management system. And what what they say is we lag in development, but I feel like we never catch up. You know, we start out behind 2 or 3 years immature compared to our peers, and our brain never really can heal from that. Although we've learned that from taking medication and neuroplasticity, that getting medication early in your lives helps you to create a more normal brain. It's the most common of childhood disorders, and it impacts an individual in many ways. And if you've experienced it yourself, you can know a lot of the ways that it might have affected you in your academics, in your interpersonal, and in how you function every day. It's been more commonly diagnosed in boys than girls because the boys seem to present with the physical hyperactivity, whereas the girls tend to have more of the inactivity. But that doesn't mean that boys are more likely to have ADHD. We don't have that research to show that. They just, right now, in the past, 13 boys got diagnosed for every girl. And now it's down to, they think, 3 boys for every girl. But the difference is the boys are getting diagnosed when they're about 7, and the girls that do get diagnosed, they're getting diagnosed when they're about age 12. So that's something that we're concerned about. ADD impacts this number of children. You're usually born with your ADHD. We don't know what causes it. We know that genetics plays a role, and that, as I said earlier, children are born into families where the parents might have it. So there's 2 types of ADHD, well, 3 types, they say, and there's 9 symptoms for the hyperactive impulsive type, and there's 9 symptoms for the inattentive type. And if you have primarily your symptoms in one category or the other, well, if you have your symptoms in the inattentive type, you're called primarily inattentive. There's very few children that just have the hyperactive impulsive type without the inattentive symptoms. So the other most common form is called combined type, where you have both the hyperactive impulsive symptoms and the inattentive symptoms. So these are the 9 hyperactive symptoms. And girls that later had the combined type told me that they had some of these problems, but the cultural message was so strong to them that they suppressed themselves in school, or they learned they were talking a lot, or they were getting out of their seat to go sharpen the pencil, or they were jiggling their foot under their desk. So their hyperactivity, when they had it, was expressed in a different way than the boys. And then the 9 symptoms of inattentive are this: making mistakes, not listening, difficult getting organized. So the child is born, and the thing to know about the symptoms is that we each could vary in how many symptoms we have. To get the diagnosis as a child, you need 6 of the symptoms out of the 18. And as an adult, you need 5. Where even now they're starting to think that even fewer than 5 would be acceptable. It's called sub-threshold. And again, even having the symptoms, it can vary in the severity of it. I think someone was saying earlier that, you know, that in reading my book, their symptoms differed from mine, and they maybe were more extreme than mine were. But I wanted to introduce you to 4 children. And this is, boy, I can't remember the names. Ivan and, oh boy, I should have checked on that. But anyway, these are the 4 children. And they're born with different symptoms. Oh, here's Hank. Hank is born with all 18 symptoms of ADHD. So these are the inattentive symptoms up here, and these are the hyperactive symptoms down here. Henrietta has 6 symptoms, and her symptoms are all inattentive. So be thinking as I talk how this is going to be impacting the child to have the 6 or the 18. And Ivy has 2 inattentive and 4 hyperactive impulsive. And Ivan has 4 inattentive and 7 hyperactive impulsive. The children are born into an environment. And what are the good things that they could be born into? The things that might help them with their ADHD. Some of the things are the stable, loving family, well connected in the community, a family that values sleep, good nutrition, exercise. The family has the financial resources to explore and provide the best interventions. The child's parents appreciating good parenting. The child's community is safe with excellent inclusive schools. The child's community has good and readily available mental and physical health care, and the child is physically healthy. Does anyone have any comments about this? Do you have any questions that you think those things aren't going to be helpful, or you think there's other things that could have been helpful?
Inattentive type here. I blanked out on the question, so I couldn't answer. How do you feel about it? Could you repeat and go back to that slide?
Well, wait a minute, I have to go back. How do doggone it. Earlier, I was able to go over here and get back to the beginning. You're seeing my whole talk.
Oh, in the
We're getting
bottom
close.
left of your screen, there's some arrows.
Oh.
Oh, or start over.
All right, here we go. From the beginning.
I like your slides, by the way.
Look great.
Yeah, they're very good.
Okay, so these are the hyperactive impulsive symptoms. These are the inattentive symptoms. These are the children, they're what they have.
Yeah.
And these are
Here we go.
the assets. A child can be born into a family that has these assets.
Well, wait. My question here is, many children are not. You're saying
Right.
this is the optimal, this would be what would be best for these children? Any
Right.
different than a neurotypical?
No, no.
So we all want this and this would help, but most people aren't.
It's just, I think for people to be thinking, did I have this when I was growing up or didn't I? And for myself, if I went through this, I had this, I had this, I had this, my mother was home, my father was an attorney. I don't know about the good parenting. We got spanked, and that's not considered good parenting nowadays.
No, but it was then.
Yeah, and I don't know about the excellent schools, but I went to the public school in my community and was able to go on to college.
If I could say to the schools, I'm 73, and I went to top private schools. That's my family is known for, and so I was going to my uncle's. But all of that has to do with what is a person supposed to be. You're supposed to be this to be smart, and ADHD, dyslexia, none of that fit into our time frame, or even now in most places. So it doesn't matter if it's public or private. I've never attended a public school. Private's the same thing, and it's very prejudiced. It's very small. It still is, even top ones. So it needs to be broken. And University of Washington, I went to one of those things. The head of this department that put on this thing for ADHD, she was horrendous on what she believed ADHD was. So we have work to do. Anyway,
Okay. I'm just saying, if a
helps
child,
people think, yeah.
yeah, I think if a child was born with these things, and I'm saying that I was fortunate that I had these things, and some people online, they're fortunate that they had these things, and they're comparing themselves to people who didn't have those things. And I think you need to, it's like white privilege. You need to recognize that you had some privileges in your growing up with your ADHD. And so I used to say, I didn't have medication, but I had structure. And I think a lot of children today don't have structure, but they get medication. So these are the other things I think helps the child. When the child is physically attractive, I think it attracts people to them. The child has the unique talents and abilities. They're going to get known for something. They're maybe already going to be into their passion. I have talked to a woman who took up the violin, and she's, it taught her discipline, and she also got good attention for having that ability. When the child is the only child, of course, they're going to be able to get more attention from the parents and be the focus of their parents. And the same applies if the child is raised by two parents. So contrasting all those assets someone could be born with, there are liabilities that someone could be born with. So all these disorders are more common when you have ADHD. You can see different research that will tell you the percentages of this or that, but just to know, basically, when you have ADHD, you're more likely to have some of these other co-occurring conditions. So
Asthma too?
So it's more likely that the child will have asthma, they have learning disorders. There's a whole range of learning disorders. They're still just finding out about them. Seems like every time I read research, there's one more thing that they say is more common if you have ADHD than if you don't.
What is this Ehlers-Danlos syndrome? I don't know that one.
I'm not, it's someone that has their joints are loose, they're loosely jointed, and it causes them a lot of pain sometimes.
Yeah, so I have a good friend that just got diagnosed with it, and there's a high prevalence amongst people with ADHD. But if you think about it's the double jointedness, you think about Cirque du Soleil type people, the contortionists and stuff, they, it's not saying that they all have ADHD, but it's that kind of really,
Amazing, amazing
right?
flexibility. So I can put my hand way up on the middle of my back. And I didn't think that was unusual, but people are surprised,
My son does it, but when you get older, it gets harder for you.
So these are some of the negative things that could happen besides being born with some of these co-occurring conditions. If the child has one or both parents with undiagnosed ADHD, they know it causes a more disruptive home life.
Financial disruption too, because your
Probably, yeah. And the confusion and not getting the papers signed for school, not getting the vaccinations done, just a lot of pressures on the parent.
And emotional, like in my family with my father, I now can understand, but timing, your age, fathers were not expected to contribute really. But emotionally, with 4 daughters, all with ADHD, and he had ADHD, we did not get the attention. He was excited for things that were out there that were self-connected. You know, so he was going for those things, highly educated and exciting, but we didn't get what we needed. And now I understand how it all fits together. But so if your parent, one of them has ADHD, I think there's huge problems that can go with it. And my family's experienced them.
Well, that's why our organization now says that when a child gets diagnosed, screening should be recommended for everyone else in the family. And a long time ago, a psychiatrist said, you know, until everyone in the family is treated, it's like a family system. You can't really get things to move forward really well until everyone knows what they're dealing with and move forward. If the child is unwanted, you can just see how that attitudinally might affect the parent-child relationship. The parents have limited education or English, and it's not talking about their intelligence at all, but they might not have the skills to deal with the school system and to be able to speak up for the needed interventions. So we're also finding out that when a child has ADHD, besides the co-occurring mental health conditions, they can have co-occurring physical conditions. And for me, I have allergies and a sleep disorder.
Psoriasis. Oh, abnormalities of the eye?
Mm-hmm.
What kinds of abnormalities of the eye?
Well, I don't know what they mean, but I'm starting about 5 years ago, I started to have double vision. And they said it's because my eye wasn't tracking right. So now I wear glasses that corrects for that. I don't know if that, but I thought, you know, I fit in that category too.
I'm wondering about that for myself. Never heard of it.
There's there's a doctor who's written a book called Brain Energy, and he's trying to understand how all these things, these physical things and the mental things could all be tied together. And he thinks it's on the cellular level that we have some flaw in the cells that impacts all of this in different ways.
Oh, goodness.
And you can feel blessed if you don't have any of them.
No, I have some. Yeah. My dad ended up, yeah.
Okay, so the child's born with certain things, but then as life goes on, what kind of things are going to make the child's life better? If the child gets one or more good friends, that's very protective. The child is doing well at school. If the child has one or more areas where they excel, they do good in athletics and physical activity, because we know that exercise is helpful for ADHD. So if the child is active, they're actually helping their dopamine in their brain. The child has adults in their life who care about them and value them. If the child is able to talk with his parents, and he knows that the family is there for him, and he feels safe and supported. The child develops perseverance and resilience. And I've talked with another psychiatrist. I said, where does that come from? And we don't know. We don't know if, you know, getting involved in something that requires discipline creates it, or if it's something you're born with. But if a child has that attitude, I mean, I spoke with women who said, I just wanted to be successful. You know, that's what got them through, is that attitude of, this is important to me. Or one woman said, it was important for my father, and that's what motivated me. I wanted him to be proud of me. So what are the things that are going to diminish a child's life? We call these liabilities. There's, they've done a study and they call it ACEs, ACEs of childhood, but there's several different things that are called the ACEs, and they're all listed over here if you can read them. But the more ACEs someone has in their life, the more likely they are to have trauma or long-lasting impacts from having a lot of ACEs. So if the child is growing up and develops rejection sensitivity, and I don't know about develops, because I think some of it can come from your environment. If you're criticized a lot, you're going to develop some rejection sensitivity. But we're finding too, I think, that it's sometimes related to your brain chemistry, because there's medications people take and it lessens their feelings of rejection sensitivity. If the child is getting bullied or shunned by their peers, that's negative. If he's often criticized by teachers or parents, and someone calculated, and it's often said that by the time a child with ADHD, and I think they're probably talking more about the hyperactive disruptive child, they receive, well, maybe inattentive too, because we get, people get on our case for not getting things done. So we get a lot of criticisms, and we might internalize that. That becomes part of our self-talk. If the child dislikes school or does poorly as a student, and the child masks, and this is, when I gave this talk before, someone didn't know what masking was, and I didn't either. I said I was too stupid to mask. But masking, when the child figures out, to be acceptable, I need to act a certain way. It's not the way I am, but it's how I'm going to force myself to act. And the child might hate rock and roll music, but to fit in with his peers, he would do it. Or, going to smoke marijuana when that's not really what they'd want to do, but they're just so desperate to be included that they mask their behavior and do whatever they think needs to be done to fit in. The child is emotionally reactive. I think that ties into the rejection sensitivity, but they can, one woman told me that she holds it together at school, but when she gets home, she had crying fits, or she would leave the room and slam the door, so that when they get upset, they can go from 0 to 10 very quickly. And some people with ADD are that way, and some people are not. I talked with a psychiatrist. He's Chinese, and he said he grew up in San Francisco. And even though he has the inattentive type of ADHD, he said he learned to fight. He learned to stand up for himself, because it was the only way forward. This is almost I'd have to say every person I've talked to that had ADHD undiagnosed, they said they felt different. They knew they were different somehow, but they didn't know why. I don't know if you can relate to that or not. Does anyone relate to that? Growing up feeling
That's how
different.
I've felt my whole life.
Yay.
Yeah. So that's the big thing when people get the diagnosis, is that it helps them to conceptualize themselves and understand themselves where they didn't have that understanding before. All right, so we're looking at these children, and what's the one card, the one asset card they could have that's going to make a huge difference in their life?
One person standing up for them and telling them, I'm with you.
You think that's it? Okay.
My mother.
Oh, having someone in your corner.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she wasn't a talker. She did not have ADHD. And she turned to me and she said, you hear me? And she got closer than ever, and she said, Sally, you are smart. Don't listen to anyone else. That's it.
Okay,
my family were supposed to be showing it, but.
that's a good answer, but it's not the one I'm looking for.
Okay, well, that's one of them.
Try again. Anyone else know what is the one card, what is the one thing you wish had happened earlier in your life?
To be diagnosed, you mean?
Yes.
There we go. I thought I had to think about what you'd think.
So the one card I think makes a huge difference is getting a diagnosis by age 8.
A lot of damage had already happened by age 8.
Yes, but the thing is, right now, physicians tell me that they're comfortable diagnosing a child that's 7. They're not that comfortable diagnosing children younger than 7. And the reason they like 7 is the child is learning to read. The child is in a structured situation all day long, so they have observations from the teachers as well as from the parents. And so I think ADD is something we're born with, and it's not right to have a delayed diagnosis. It's there. We just have to recognize it. And we can recognize it by the time they're 8. Maybe someday in the future, we'll recognize it at birth.
Are you 8 in 2nd grade? How old are you? 7?
Usually 7 in the 2nd.
7? Yeah, my 2nd grade teacher destroyed me. No, I would want it before that.
But well, I guess if you get diagnosed by 7 and it goes forward from there, and before we started the session, someone wanted to know what early diagnosis would make a difference. And I have to say, I've only come across 2 people who were diagnosed in the 2nd grade. And both of them, I have to say, I envy. One of them just has really good self-esteem. He's in college now. His having ADHD is not a big deal for him. And the other person is someone we just hired to be our part-time executive director. And he was diagnosed, he said, when he was 10. And the thing was, when I called his references, they all said, he is great. And so I think about how people would have thought about me. And I don't, it's not like people would call up and I know that they'd all say Cynthia's great. But the 2 that got diagnosed early, people would say they were great. And so that's why I'm thinking early diagnosis makes a big difference.
Could I say one thing? It might also be, I'm also dyslexic, and I think the dyslexia was really a huge component of what was happening to me.
Yes.
And they didn't know what to do with that in those days.
Yeah, same thing. I was diagnosed in 2018 with ADHD, and I thought, oh, that answers everything.
Mhm.
And then the more I got to know people with ADHD, I could see that it was there, but I knew it just didn't scratch the real itch of what was truly wrong with me until about, I think it was 2 years later when I figured out it was dyslexia.
So I actually like what you're doing a lot, Cynthia. You're looking at the positives and how do we heal? How do we be there for people? I love this. It's kind of healing for us. Well, we didn't get it, and we've been through this, and we don't want this for anyone else. And I want this to go all the way through until end of life, by the way. Anyone younger than this, don't just stop with your age. Keep going, because she's 80, I'm 73, and it's crap out here when you're on Medicare. So keep it going. But this is really important. Don't think public school, private is just we need a totally different framework. But I think what I'd like to add here before I forget it as an ADHD component is I think we need to have elementary school and even preschool looking out for certain things. And teachers and schools, I've dealt with the South. My God, there's so many that are horrible. Even the counselors don't understand ADHD, but those who have dyslexia need to be caught really early. It's like, who is this child? For every child, we need to have something that kind of catches the ones who are stumbling. Why are they stumbling? Might be family problems easily, but it also these things. And then you can start kind of focusing and catching, not to push them down, but to make sure they don't get harmed by anyone in the school who's a teacher who doesn't know what the shit they're doing. But also, if you are dyslexic, you know, they caught it the first week in kindergarten for me because everybody's learning how to read. And at the end of first week of kindergarten, they knew I was going to always have, but it was a special school, but they didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So I would hope that your wonderful thing here could also be looking, how can we share this as you go forward? How can we catch net more?
Well, I have to say, it's starting to happen, that people are starting to talk about neurodivergence. And in England, actually, they just brought a bill to screen all children for neurodivergence in school. You know, so it's a, but okay, so now we get back to the child's got the diagnosis, but is that alone going to make a big difference? We have to look at what are the good things to happen after a diagnosis. And maybe some of this applies to adults as well. So how the family talks to the child about their ADHD, and maybe how you talk to yourself about your ADHD, is going to make a big difference. That the people in the child's immediate circle get educated about ADHD from reliable sources. And so that's like the grandparents are on board, the relatives, the neighbors, you know, everyone is on board. And even adults have this struggle where they say, my parents deny that I have it, or, you know, that they have that issue. That once the child gets diagnosed, the parents accept the best practices for the treatment of ADHD. And as I said, we believe medication is the best treatment. That the child's going to take a medication that's effective in reducing their symptoms. So sometimes you don't find the right medication right away, and you have to stick with it to try a few to see which one is the most helpful. The parent has a role to play in teaching the child executive functions and helping with setting up routines and habits. I had a friend who went to military school, and it was very hard on him because if he was messy or didn't have his shoes shined or his locker tidy, his whole unit got punished. And so from that hard training, he's learned to have a lot of good habits. But I mean, I'm not advocating that the way as to how to create good habits, but the parents have the role to play in helping to create that home. So when the child gets surrounded by people who understand him and love him, and then they're going to a school that provides appropriate accommodations without shaming. And so some people, back when Ritalin was short acting, the children would have to get called out to go to the nurse's office and get the medication. And so Dr. Dodson recommends that all children be on the long-acting version so they don't get called out in class. And it's a concern that I've read that most adults are on short-acting medications. And I don't know, they don't know why that's true, because the long-acting are preferred.
It's cost for some people. I've spoken to some.
Oh, that's the reason. Yeah. And they say that the long-acting is also better for children and to prevent diversion. So the child grows up valuing himself, and there's no need to mask. So a lot of adults, after they get diagnosed, they want to unmask. They want to be who they are, but they've been masked for so long, it's really a challenge to learn to unmask and to value who they are the way they are.
Well, I want to add to that and say, it's incredibly difficult to unmask if you have other people in your life, because
Ah,
systems don't like change, and they don't like it when you start being somebody different. And so in a very odd sort of way, I've had this grand experiment where I got diagnosed, got divorced, and I've had the opportunity to be whoever I want now. And it's amazing. But I don't tell anybody, step one, get a divorce, step one, quit your job, right? That, like, you just shouldn't have to do that. But it's very difficult to unmask when you have other people in your life.
I haven't thought of that, but I guess because some of those relationships you're going to lose, and that's a probably a concern as well.
Well, some of them are built on social contracts you don't want anymore.
Mm.
Right now, the divorce wasn't a social contract I didn't want, but when I decide to start taking care of myself and
Yeah.
not everybody else, then that really upsets the apple cart. And it's hard for the person who's been newly diagnosed to figure out what's the, how do
What-
you not
Yeah, what's been put on you and what is you?
that. Well, I'll tell you, what that is after everybody leaves.
I don't say that
I don't
again.
understand.
I said, what is everybody else's versus yours when everybody leaves.
Oh, when you,
Uh,
When
they
everybody
live your
else
life.
leaves and you're left with the stuff and you're like, oh, that. Yes.
Well, in my experience, as I was diagnosed and part of the reason that I got a diagnosis is because I was struggling with increasingly, being late more and more often and having a harder and harder time with managing time. And I had to learn I had no choice but to, stop masking. My mask fell off, whether, it just like fell into a million pieces. And I had to start figuring out how to explain to people, why I was late all the time
mhm.
and why it was, why is it worse now? And, trying to explain, no, it's not because I don't care. It's not because I disrespect you. It's not because I'm lazy. It's because my executive functions are not working. And, I do everything I can. And these are the things that might help if you try and do them to support me. But, and if you can't stand it, I'm sorry. I'm doing my best. That's all I
Yeah.
can do.
Well, and that's helpful for people that are in a position where they can share their ADHD. I think that helps move the whole thing forward when some of us can come out and say, I have ADHD and this is what, but not everyone feels that freedom to do that either.
It's not real
Well,
for many cases.
I think my point is, like, if I had had a different job and didn't, couldn't say to my boss, I'm going through the strange things and I'm trying all these different medications. So if I'm spacey, that's why. If she said, too bad, you're fired, it wouldn't mean I couldn't say, oh, well, in that case, I'll put my mask back on and start acting normal, because normal wasn't even an option when this started happening. So it's like all my choices were be myself and have a job where hopefully people understand and can work with me, or be myself and get fired. That, be myself was the only choice.
I wanted to say something to you. What was your name again? Oops, you just
Eva?
Yeah.
Me? I'm Eva. Yeah.
You, yeah.
Mhm.
What's your name? Leva?
Eva. It's an I. It's a letter I.
Yeah.
I-E-V-A. Eva.
I wanted you to hear this because you're speaking. I very much appreciate what you're saying because you're trying.
Yes.
I have people in my family who have been, high IQ education, and they refuse to do to get involved, to do anything. And it really harms other people's lives when you have to interact. I mean, I remember my high school graduation, my sister, who was just a year older, was told the day before, that is when we are going to leave and you'll be left if you don't. She got in the shower at that time when we were supposed to leave the next day. I almost missed my high school graduation. I mean, almost. And never was there an apology. Never is there any accounting. It was like, well, we made it, you know.
Right.
It
Well, here
destroyed
was.
a marriage. So, but what you're doing regardless is you're trying to find how to do the best you can. And I think, but I do believe being accountable is a very important part of this. When you screw up, something for your child or your husband or whoever you're with, it doesn't matter. You're supposed to be at an engagement or a high school graduation or anything, a movie over and over. That's really crap. It really does damage.
It does. I mean,
So-
I have to acknowledge that I've definitely caused aggravation for people in my family, for my loved ones,
But
for
I mean,
myself.
I would like to see this community say, okay, this is horribly hard, and I see you, these neurotypicals, if you call them.
Mhm.
And I don't want that. I want us to be in loving, safe, secure, and I want you to trust me. So,
Mhm.
for instance, go
What's-
in 2 separate cars. Find ways. What are
Yes.
no, but find ways.
Yeah.
Show them. I don't want to do this. I'm going to do everything I can, but let's be super careful, because the most important thing is I want your trust, and I want you to know I care about your happiness and trust in me. So it's like, but I haven't heard that from this group. And I think it's this accountability thing. How do we do it? If this is the reality, which it is,
Mhm.
how do we create something else that bridges this gap? Because it is a very serious stuff that's happened in my family that's because of this and other things. But what I wanted you to hear was, this is really good stuff coming out of you. You're trying your hardest and you're trying different things. And I think it's really hard doing this on your own. So that's.
But I suspect we're digressing from the direction of our guest speaker. So maybe we should.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to lose that one because I think that's exceptional.
All right, so when we know from research that if people are medicated for their ADHD, they have fewer accidents, they have fewer brain injuries, fewer fractures, less substance abuse, less sexually transmitted diseases, no depression, suicide, criminal activity, and teenage pregnancies. They are less if ADHD is diagnosed and people are on medication. The non-medication treatments for ADHD are helpful, but they aren't treating the ADHD. Only medication treats the ADHD. And this is the website with the best research drawn from people all around the world. All these authors, all these colleagues have approved some of these things that I pulled out, but there's 210 statements at the website of things they have agreed on as far as what ADHD is like and what the treatments, what the side effects, all that. So we'll go back to the 4 children. Hank and Ivan and Henrietta and Ivy. So Hank had all the symptoms and all the assets. You can see the colored cards. He's got all the assets, all the things. He was born with the right stuff. He enjoyed the right stuff when he was growing up, but he has no diagnosis. Henrietta has the few symptoms, but she has many liabilities. The dark cards are the liabilities that she has. And the green cards and the blue cards are the assets that she had. Ivy has an early diagnosis, but her parents deny the diagnosis and don't pursue treatment. And Ivan is fortunate. He's diagnosed early and he has all the enhancement cards. So even though he had some liabilities, the gray cards and all this, you know, he didn't have all the assets. He didn't have all the good things growing up, but he got the diagnosis and he got all the enhancement cards. So which child would you like to be?
I'm not sure that that's really a very productive question.
Okay, just something to think about. Just
Right.
something to think about. Okay, so I asked GP Chat, are people with ADHD as capable as people without ADHD? And I really liked the answer. Absolutely. People with ADHD are just as capable as people without. While ADHD can present challenges related to attention, focus, impulsivity, and hyperactivity, it doesn't determine a person's overall capabilities, intelligence, or potential for success.
Bravo.
Here's the little girl. Here she is as an adult. So this is what I think it's Dr. Seuss. No, I should have. You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. So I mentioned this earlier. We think all children should be screened. We don't want to diagnose young children, but we want to get them diagnosed and treated before their 8th birthday. And we should screen all family members of any child diagnosed with ADHD. And then, because we know that girls have gone massively underdiagnosed, our organization has started a project called findtheadhdgirls.org. And at this website, we have a questionnaire that parents can fill out. And the questionnaire relies on the DSM criteria, but also some additional criteria that physicians and psychologists who diagnose girls with ADHD said that they commonly see these behaviors. So if you know any parents that are wondering if their daughter might have ADHD, because as we have said, it presents differently than a lot of boys, I would recommend that they visit this website. And I guess that's the end of the presentation.
That was pretty great, Cynthia. I don't think I've ever seen one, you know, that like Sally said, that takes you down kind of the, not only what is it, how is it, but also what do we need in the form of support?
It's the
Like
best.
very specific.
Yeah, this is the best presentation I've heard on CHADD anywhere.
Well, and I'm hoping to do it at the conference. And what
It should.
Well, so when someone said they thought it was something interactive because I said it was a card game, I actually think I'm going to create a pack of cards for everyone that comes in, and they'll each have a different pack, you know?
See? This is a creative ADHD brain going on.
Yeah, I was excited about that idea. And then on the back, I'll have our business card.
I'd love to contact you because I have an idea too. The Melinda Gates thing. How do we get a hold of you with ideas?
Cynthia.
I'm dyslexic, so is there a way I can leave a voice message or talk to you?
Yeah. Well, the organization's called the Inattentive ADHD Coalition, which is kind of long. Oh, you could, simply, you could email admin@iadhd.org.
I'll put it in
Would you
the
put that in there?
chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat. You betcha. And then
Really
we'll
wonderful.
post the presentation recording and Cynthia's contact information on the